A hurricane is forecast to pass over your location. What's the better option? Staying on the boat or hunkering down on shore? Well, like so many other things when it comes to boating, it depends. Hi, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll share why I would never again stay on board during a hurricane and what you'll want to consider to make your best decision. Now, this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Yugo Wear. Yugo has the only waterproof floating phone and tablet cases using dry suit zipper technology. Invest in your safety because if you don't protect, you can't connect. Your electronics are fully functional while inside, and there's plenty of room for your keys, your cash, and your cards. To get the only dry bag on the market with zero fails, visit yugowear.com and use coupon SAVE20BG, that's SAVE20BG, for 20% off. Yugo, just add water. I find it interesting as I'm recording this podcast. The time I'm doing this, we're about 3 days away from what we expect to be Hurricane Ian. It's currently Tropical Storm Ian, but we expect it to be hitting in this area. The forecast that came out 15 minutes ago finally says that we are not in the cone for a direct hit. That is for the eye to be passing overhead. So we're kind of lucky, but we probably still will get tropical storm force conditions. And the question that I often get with hurricane prep is whether it's best to stay on the boat or go ashore. Now, my answer is simple, and this is for any type of a hurricane, category 1 through 5. Seek shelter ashore if at all possible. Stay on the boat only if the boat offers better shelter than anything ashore. Now, you can kind of downgrade this. Pretty certain that it's going to be a tropical storm where you are. Yeah, I'll stay on the boat. In fact, that's what we're planning to do for Ian. But if there is a significant risk of it hitting me as hurricane force, I am going to be trying to find a place to go ashore. In 2003, we went through Hurricane Marty aboard chafe, our Tayana 37. And yes, I mean aboard. Marty's eye passed directly overhead as a Category 1 storm. We had anchored in Puerto Escondido, a truly excellent hurricane hole in the Sea of Cortez. At the time, though, there were no sturdy buildings ashore. There are concrete buildings there now, but at the time we were there, there was nothing more than a tiki hut. The nearest town was 15 miles away, with hitchhiking the only way to get there as the storm closed in. So we stayed on the boat. We didn't know if we were taking our lives in our hands or if we'd be able to help chafe protect us. Obviously, we survived, as did everyone else on the other occupied boats. And in one sense, it wasn't that scary. We did what we had to, as we had to. But having gone through it and having seen the aftermath, I would not recommend it at all. I will never, ever stay on a boat during a hurricane again if there is any reasonable option ashore. But since I've done it, I'll say a few words about staying on the boat. If there isn't a viable option ashore and you stay on the boat, the question becomes, should you just hunker down below decks or stay on deck? Admittedly, once the winds hit 35 knots or so, there isn't much you can do, but there are some things that you can do to help your boat and yourself. Now, perhaps I should first offer a clarification. When I say stay on deck, I'm not meaning that everyone aboard will be on deck all the time. One person on deck, tethered in the cockpit, on watch. And keeping watch is really probably the most important thing to do. Are you dragging? Is another boat dragging towards you? If you can't dodge it, you may have to call others on deck to prepare for a collision or a grounding. At the same time, if there are too many unsecured objects flying through the air, everyone may be better off staying below. There are no rules as to what is the best course of action. You need to react to what you see happening around you. That's a big rule. No rules. If you're going to be on deck, you have to be prepared for it. Hurricane-force winds with torrential rain are ferocious and can result in hypothermia. Our foul weather gear simply was insufficient. Wetsuits kept us much warmer. Wearing our dive masks enabled us to keep our eyes open in the driving rain, and it was actually easier to breathe through our snorkels. One important thing for anyone who is on a boat during any storm, not just a hurricane, is to wear shoes all the time. If you have to abandon the boat quickly, or if it should suffer damage, you don't want to be barefoot, and you are not going to have to want to look for shoes. Wear sturdy sandals or sneakers, not flip-flops. It's also good to have some sort of waterproof light, a small flashlight or a glow stick. Keep it tucked in a pocket, looped around a belt, whatever you can do. Before the hurricane, we had laid out spare chafe gear, thinking that we might have to replace it during the storm. That would have been absolutely impossible. Put all your chafe gear and backup snubbers on before the storm. Don't expect to be able to go forward on deck anytime during the storm. Now, during Marty, boaters generally agreed that trying to motor forward on their anchor to relieve the strain actually did the opposite. During lulls, slack would develop in the chain and rode, and then gusts would just slam the boat back hard on the anchor, threatening to break it out. But if your anchor was dragging, motoring could definitely keep the boat from grounding. Most of us ended up running the engine in neutral at the height of the storm, so we could put it into gear instantly if needed. Other boats dragged and didn't have sufficient engine power to make headway against the storm, but they were able to slow their rearward progress, and they could steer sufficiently, while sliding backwards, to avoid hitting other boats and hooking someone else's anchor with theirs. They could also kind of pick where they went aground to a certain extent, avoiding rocks in favor of sandy beaches or mangroves. And one more thing to note about hurricanes, which takes on additional importance if you're staying aboard. It is very hard to know where the storm center is in relation to you. Your standard weather sources are likely to be knocked out. Don't count on the storm going where it was supposed to. Hurricane Marty I was forecast to pass to the east of our location, and when the storm suddenly let up, everyone in the harbor thought it was over. Instead, we were in the eye, and 30 minutes later, we were going through the second eye wall. The lesson: if it gets too good, too fast, you are likely in the eye. Now, what do I mean by too good, too fast? Well, basically, for what the conditions have been and how long it took to build those conditions. For example, if the storm built to 70 knots and a total whiteout over a course of 6 hours, then the wind goes to almost zero in the space of 5 minutes. That was our experience in Marty. It's too big of a change too quickly. If you suspect you're in the eye, make any repairs or fixes that you need to, but make them quickly, and be ready to be back in storm mode at any minute, because when the second eye wall hits, it's going to get ugly quickly. Okay, I hope that all helps you in making your decision. Number one, if there is a decent place to stay ashore, stay ashore. If the winds are going to be hurricane force or above, say 60 knots, technically a hurricane 64, 60 knots or above, you do your best to find good shelter ashore. Under that, staying on your boat is okay. And if you do stay on your boat, do what you can to help your boat, but take precautions and do things smartly. Don't think that you're going to be able to go forward and play with chafe gear or replacing equipment. You're not. Anyways, I hope that helped you. I hope you understand. I hope everything goes well with Ian for us and for everyone else in the affected area. Please, if you find this all helpful, tell your friends about it and be sure to subscribe to the Boat Galley Podcast.